And I look forward to today's panel because we've got some great speakers. So I'm going to just briefly introduce them and bring them up. So first we have a name that's familiar to most, I'm sure, Arthur Jemison, who is currently the executive director of the Detroit Housing Commission. Come on up, Arthur. Arthur's had many roles in our state, and so we'll go through that. But I want to say, when you first took this role, I remember us meeting, and I was so encouraged about your honesty about where Detroit is and your organization is in dealing with housing in the city of Detroit, but also your eagerness to partner and find new solutions and new partners for the Housing Commission as well. So I'm happy you're on the panel today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Secondly, thank you to Congressman Jack Bergman, who's joining our panel today. He represents the first... Congressman Bergman represents the 1st District of Michigan and serves on the Housing Armed Services Committee, the House Budget Committee, and the Veterans Affairs Committee in the 119th Congress. Thank you so much for joining us. And I also want to say thank you for supporting the housing bills in the federal government that will really help get us some additional funding to get more housing built in our state. So thank you so much for your support.
You bet.
And then finally, I want to invite Josh Lunger up. Josh is the Vice President of Government Affairs for the Grand Rapids Chamber. Oh, we got a little musical chairs going on.
Yeah, a little for fun.
And before I took this position at MSHDA, actually, when I was kind of had that long run up to being the CEO and executive director, somebody told me you need to meet with Josh. So I did, met with him early on, and it was really interesting that one of the key people for me to meet with as I was coming into this position worked for a local chamber, right? It's just maybe not what you would have thought as far as that housing partner. But Josh, you really have taken the lead with partners across the state at being innovative in solutions and policy that really help partners across the state address housing. So I want to say thank you for all that. So let's dig in.
Yes.
Let's dig in. Usually I'm the one getting grilled, so I'm kind of excited to be the one doing the grilling today. Congressman, I got to start with you. Because,
of course you do.
Things are super boring in D.C. these days. But I just was hoping, I know you're really busy. Bills are being worked on. We have a bill that is just passed out of the House, the big bill. And it has some housing things in there. But I was hoping you could tell us a little bit about what the state of housing is on a federal level and what the impact of the passing of that bill might have on the housing industry.
Well, thanks, Amy. Appreciate the opportunity to, number one, represent. By the way, welcome to my house. This is part of the 1st District of Michigan, right here. I love to say that every time I get here. But welcome to our home. And when you think about the elements, and I wanted to make sure I get this right, because if you don't get the words right, especially all of you who are interested in housing, and if you don't get the words right in the policy and understand the numbers and how they interact, you're not going to have the outcome you're hoping for. But in the big, beautiful bill last week, there's 3 points. Number one, for those seeking home ownership, it preserves the mortgage interest deduction, okay? It expands the child tax credit and makes it permanent from $1,000 to $2,000. But I think one of the biggest things we're going to be maybe talking about here today, but it boosts the low-income housing tax credit. And what that basically means is that states can increase their tax credits through 2029 by about another 12.5%. So the money coming into the market to build is now secured, and the states can put in more money to help along with the federal government, because this has to be a partnership between the states, because different states have different needs. And but it is a good bill, and now it's over in the Senate. And I always bust my favorite new Michigan junior senator's chops, Senator Slotkin, because we served for 4 years together in the House, and she's really on the leading edge here of getting good things done for Michigan. So we worked together across the House and the Senate, but also across party lines when it gets really right down to doing the details. That's not necessarily what you see in the media.
Yeah. The low-income housing tax credit is very important to us in this state. It's primarily what we use to build multifamily housing for families at about 80% and below area median income. And I want to say in the last year, we used that product alone to create over 5,000 additional units in the state. So it's a big deal. That 12.5% means a lot.
It does.
And it really is a private-public partnership moving forward. So thank you. And again, thank you for your support on that. Our fingers are crossed. Director Jimmons. Arthur, you were the founding director of the Detroit's Housing and Revitalization Department back when you worked for the city of Detroit. And it was a very interesting time when you were there. The city was coming out of bankruptcy. It's certainly come a long way since then. Can you tell me a little bit about how you've seen the housing industry change and the housing market change in the city since that time?
Sure. I guess the things I'd want to highlight, maybe just to sort of first wear the hat that I'm wearing now from the Housing Commission standpoint, rents are up, right? And so rents are up, and the way that impacts us at the Housing Commission is the money we have to support vouchers in the market it doesn't go as far as it used to. So I'd say from that standpoint, that's a big impact. The second impact is the same point. Rents are up, right? So it allows more development actors to do more, to bring more capital to the table to redevelop housing in the city. I'd say when I think about then and now, I think the work of the land bank really over the last 10 years has been huge, both initially in terms of sort of selling and rehabbing, and then they were involved in demolition at the beginning as well. But I think when you look at the way Detroit has evolved, they have had a huge hand. But just to maybe share a few other viewpoints, your market developers will say rents are up and it's great, but they're not up as high as we need them to be, and they're really still in the 80% range. So 80% of AMI range, which means that they sort of still qualify for affordable. So there's a real, in Detroit, I'd say, we're really excited and we get a lot of a big boost out of the progress we've made. I think we've also recognized a long way to go, and that we need some of the great things that have happened to kind of continue into the future for us to continue to have Detroit get stronger as it has been over the last 12 years.
Yeah, I think when I was looking at data, the city of Detroit had some of the highest increases in anywhere in the state for rental.
Absolutely.
And home ownership is no different. The average cost of a home in our state right now is about $317,000, and the average Michigan family, I think, can afford like $175,000, right? So the gap between what the cost of housing is and what Michigan families can afford is just, it's not getting any smaller. Unfortunately, in our state, our incomes have been pretty flat, while the cost of housing has soared, mostly because we have a supply and demand issue, but certainly the costs of labor and the cost of the supplies to build housing have gone up as well over the last decade, actually. Okay, we're getting to you, Josh. And to the other side of the state, realizing that you work for a chamber, and so you're meeting with businesses all the time and trying to meet their needs. What are you hearing from them about how housing is impacting their businesses and in the city of Grand Rapids as a whole?
Yeah, I think the answer to that is, to make it more complex than it probably needs to be, has shifted. I think 7, 8, 9 years ago, when we started really hearing from our West Michigan employers about just wanting to have options that are affordable for folks to stay here or to move here or to keep that new college grad or whatever here. When I say here, West Michigan, obviously. that's changed quite a bit, and I think what we're seeing more now is this focus on kind of vibrant environments, creating those walkable, amenity-rich neighborhoods that are magnetic, that when someone experiences it, they're like, I want to live here, this is a high quality of life. To your point about the growth in rents, we've seen huge increase in both the for sale price and increase in rents. We've also had great wage growth, but it hasn't kept up. And part of that is we've got 20 years where we didn't build enough housing. So what we're trying to do is figure out how do we maximize our efforts as a community. And we really think that some of those missing middle typologies, some of those areas like our household size has shrunk tremendously in the last 50 years, but we're still building mainly large lot, single family homes. How do we start to chip away at that at scale so that we have more places with more options at different price points? Because we're really excited for what we've got in terms of economic activity in Grand Rapids and West Michigan, but we have to start to chip away at this underproduction that we've seen. And we've seen some big success. I think somebody's going to mention housing TIF here eventually. I'm convinced that if we hadn't passed that with everyone that got behind it a couple years ago, we'd be producing a lot less housing. We just celebrated one of the first major office conversions. I think there's an opportunity, especially in urban environments, to return to office has been a big discussion for a while. I don't know how much more we're going to get folks back always downtown. So why don't we add more housing and create more consistent foot traffic that way? And that's going to support small business. That's going to support the office users as well. So that was a lot, but that's where we're at. I mean, it's shifting, and I think it's getting towards more on that urban vibrancy that we want to see.
Yeah, I know you helped us work on that housing tax increment financing program a couple of years ago. It's been about 18 months, I think, since that program started, and we've already at MSHA approved enough projects that equal about 1,600 housing units. So that one new program at a state level, one of the only in the country, some say only, but I think Texas has a similar program. 1,600 in 18 months, and people are just starting to understand the tool and how to use it. Wow. So it really has made a difference. So thank you for your advocacy on that as well. I also want to mention that there are cards on the table. And we will be taking questions. So if you want to write your question on the blue card in about probably 20, 25 minutes, I will ask you to raise them up, and then we have some folks that will collect those. So be thinking of some good questions along the way. Arthur, back to you. Let's talk a little bit more about the city and the different changes that we've seen happening. Can you talk about the different roles, I think whether it's the public-private, on the public side, the city, the state, the federal government, kind of how all those roles have worked together to contribute to what's happening in the city of Detroit around housing?
Absolutely. So, I mean, first, MSHA has been and is now an outstanding partner to the city in the work that they do. I mean, I think, maybe I'll start with, recently you announced a whole series of low-income housing tax credit awards, and our city was lucky enough to get a few of those. There was a time when, we didn't have that kind of success. And, I made it a real focus, and the folks who came after me, like Donald Rencher and Julie Schneider, have made it a real focus as well, to sort of to get those awards. Now, the way we got those awards was frankly by doing some things a little differently, by trying to focus on creating a project pipeline that reflected the best of Detroit, that was folded into all the growth that was happening in the city, and focused on layering what we were doing onto the other investments in blight remediation, investments in parks through the Strategic Neighborhood Fund, but trying to focus on the places that, by building affordable housing here, we were putting people in areas of high opportunity. We also focused a lot on preserving our existing affordable housing stock, again, in those places where high opportunity could be created. So I think the reason we had success with you was by, frankly, doing the things the QAP called for, like putting layers of growth on one another and making affordable housing part of it. On the federal side, we also had a lot of work to do. I have a favorite anecdote about the mayor and then Secretary Castro talking about what Detroit needed to do to be better. And I'll let the mayor say his version of that story at some point. But the message that came back to me was, Arthur, you need to get to work, and you need to get this together. And so the real focus was spend the money you've got, spend it well, spend it on time, and then let's show people what we can do, and then let's attract more federal resource here because we can spend it and because we know how to execute it and layer it into the other work that's happening. So that's how we built the relationship with the federal team. It wasn't always easy, just like it hasn't been with us, but it's really been meaningful for us to get focused and have the partnership of the local federal representatives, all of the members of the council, and of course our congressional delegation helping us do that. But that's how we got better, was by focusing on compliance, meeting all of our requirements, spending on time, and showing that we could do multi-layered financings and execute.
I mean, really, just being a good partner, right? And I can tell you, in the 2 years I've been at MSHDA, the city of Detroit has been a great partner, mostly because they communicate. I mean, really, it's hard for state agencies to be responsive to local needs if no one tells us what your local needs are. We have created, through the implementation of the statewide housing plan, we've created regional housing partnerships across the state, 15. We use those as mechanisms to understand what's happening locally and being able to respond to those plans. We've created the My Neighborhood program that puts about $60 million a year just into being responsive to those plans. But in certain cities, like the city of Detroit, a Donald or a Julie never hesitates to pick up the phone to say, hey, this is a priority for us. Can you help us get to where we need to be? In fact, in our new qualified action plan that the draft was just presented to our board earlier this month, I guess we're still in May, really shows that, because there is now a category that talks about community priority, trying to make sure that the state is matching up dollars to projects that communities want in their cities, right? And so thank you. It's been a great partnership. The city's ability and willingness to partner financially has been imperative too, helping to close that gap. And we're seeing that a lot across the state. There's several counties, Kalamazoo County, Ingham County, Kent County, and in Grand Rapids, that have really created these housing trust funds or some variety of that. And it has been very, very helpful in filling the gap in partnering with MSHDA. So we can see that's really instigating a lot of new housing development across the state. Okay, I had a question for all of you, so you guys can be thinking, and whoever wants to go first can go first. We're talking about partnerships, and that's really what it takes to get housing done in this environment. We at MSHDA have tried to be very open to trying new things and working with new partners. I'd like to hear from each of you, what does partnership mean to you? What partnerships have you seen that have helped address housing?
Let me take
Congressman,
the lead. Marines always show up first. Well, maybe after the Navy SEALs, whatever. But if you are trying to put together a partnership environment, no matter what the goal of the partnership is, just remember that I am one of 435 representatives in the House of Representatives. So my pie is split 435 different ways. So to come to with the expectations, and we will work with you, but I have to negotiate with 434 others. Now, when you think about where the federal government can play a role in partnerships going forward, is, I think, twofold. Number one, reduce and eliminate the unnecessary federal regulations that don't add value to your communities in trying to build. There's some state regulations, there's local regulations, but to reduce the number of federal regulations that would impact your market space. The second is to create the environment where the federal government, to the best of its ability, and it's not unlimited, to block grant funding that will go directly to the state, okay, and then bypassing unnecessary operations and maintenance expenses of those federal departments that take their cut before that block, that dollar would normally come to the state. So I think those two areas would be a potential here that, I don't know if there's a right size for the federal government, but we use right size for anything. That sometimes means different things to different people, but we definitely, at the federal government level, need to enable Michigan without being overbearing to do what it wants to do.
No, I think we, at Mission, I know we appreciate that. We know there's some redundancies to the implementation of federal programs. Removing some of those unnecessary barriers will make it easier and more affordable to access those programs and put more money actually into housing. So I want to say thank you for that work. Josh?
I think what's hard about housing is a lot of times it gets emotional. You run into challenges of prioritization and other significant things that it can trip you up if you're waiting for something perfect to happen. I think it's important to find the core group that want to take action and are excited and have the knowledge to do it, and just sit with them at the table and say, how can I help you? And we've been doing that a lot in Greater Grand Rapids lately. I feel like we've got some really strong people. What we run up against is this, sometimes people think that every housing project can solve every problem. And you know what, if it's LIHTC here and it's market rate here, that's great. We need to get to more of a, see that this isn't a zero-sum game when we're doing these projects, and they actually support each other. And I think having the right group of people that can put together those competing viewpoints sometimes and still move forward is really important. So we're trying to constantly prop those people up because they're great resources for our community, and try to help them remove the obstacles. Because it's really hard building housing right now. I mean, we're constantly seeing challenges, and if we didn't have the housing tax increment financing, if we didn't have the Kent County Housing Revolving Loan Fund, and we didn't have the partners we did, I think we'd be even further behind.
Yeah.
I want to sneak in one little point, which would just be that I think when people look to partner with the city, they're really looking at, to some extent, for a combination of like a bully pulpit plus some of the capital we get to allocate from block grant awards, et cetera, that we receive. And they're looking for kind of a small P kind of political push to help to get a project approved. And I think that's how we show up as partners. And I think anyone who's worked with the city, knows that, if you got an allocation of funds and you've got an Alexa Bush or a Kate Trudeau or Matt Walters working on it, it's going to happen, right? It's going to get done. And I think that's been an effective strategy. I mean, we've all been in a mayor meeting where the mayor says, we need to get this done, and he just bangs his head, and he bangs all of our heads against the rules and regs to make sure we're doing it right,
Yeah.
but that it happens. I think there's a place where, I think everyone at this table will probably agree, where some people would call it deregulation. I probably would call it kind of as of rightism, where we say it needs to be as of right to do something that's going to add housing stock. If you're doing the basic things that you need to do to make housing healthy, you need to make it as of right. It needs to be uncomplicated and simple. We recently passed the pilot action at the city council with the help of, again, the mayor and Julie and the HRD team. It's something that acts in a kind of as of right way. If you're doing something for our community, you're going to get to do something else really quickly. And I think we need to have more of that kind of approach And I think that's probably something that's probably a lot of bipartisan positive view about, because it is a form of deregulation to say, if you're going to add housing to our community quickly, you have a fast track to get your things done.
Yeah, I got to say that pilot ordinance is a huge win. And I talk about it a lot because it is so unusual to have an administration and a city council working hand in hand, being willing to set up a ordinance that, in a sense, maybe takes away their power, right?
Right.
And for those of you who aren't familiar, it is a payment in lieu of taxes ordinance. So in a very short way, it helps subsidize the development of housing by giving a tax abatement. And usually those have to go through city council for approval, and they need public hearings, and it takes a long time, and it allows for NIMBYism to occur, and it's a deterrent for developers. In the city of Detroit, they passed an ordinance that says if you're doing A, B, C, D, you automatically get a pilot. We're going to shorten that time. It's going to be predictable. So as a developer, I know if I follow these rules, I'm going to get it, and I can move on and get my development done. It is a huge win. It's kudos to all of you in Detroit who worked so hard on getting that ordinance done. We get a lot more done together, and that's a perfect example of it. Didn't mean the mayor had to take all of the credit or the council had to take all the credit. They just knew it needed to get done, and they worked together to get it done.
Yep.
It's a big deal. Oh, Congressman, you represent a very large and diverse district. You've got lots of rural and remote communities. Tourism is huge throughout your whole district. What are you hearing from your constituents about housing in northern Michigan?
Well, the simple answer is we need more. But what does more housing mean? You know, we use the word a lot of times affordable. I think the real word should be attainable.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Because whether it's affordable or not, if you can't attain it, what difference does it make? And that's the thing I hear most. I want to be here in the UP or the northern lower, and I don't have a whole lot of money, and I want to get started. By the way, here's the data point I heard probably a few weeks ago. Across the country, the average age of the first-time home buyer is now 38 years old. Wow. When you think about that, I mean, I bought my first house on the GI Bill when I got back from Vietnam. I was 24. Okay, well, but when you think about that, whatever the reason to the why is, if it's anything other than a personal decision by the people buying the home, then there's something there that maybe we, as a governing body, could do to do better. But now, this is an attempt at humor. I have to say that in Washington, D.C., because sometimes I'll slip a one-liner in on them and they're not sure if I was trying to be funny. But the point is, in the UP especially, we want people to come up there, bring their family, bring their friends, bring their credit cards, bring their cash, have a great time, and then leave. Because we are not trying to be Grand Rapids. And we're not even trying to be Marquette. But Marquette is kind of an oasis in the UP that draws people to come to. They're drawn there to go to school at Northern. They're drawn there because they just love the outdoors environment, and it's a great place to live. But we as communities sometimes create our own limitations. We self-limit ourselves. And it's usually at some lower level of government with zoning regulations or permit approvals. And I'll give you a specific example. We have this place called K.I. Sawyer Air Force Base. It was closed it's been closed for 30 years. It's still under development, which means nothing has happened. And when you talk about housing, and you talk about the ability of a community to decide on what it wants to look like, that is just a tremendous opportunity, but we have to have the buy-in from the local leaders. There's nothing I can do. mean, I can maybe, provide some, again, some grant money, whatever, but it has to be the decision at the local level before we can get involved at the federal level.
Yeah, no. That actually leads into a question for you. I'm going a little out of order, so if you guys knew the order, I don't want you to be like, what is she doing?
Is there an order?
Yeah. Arthur, you have a unique perspective as somebody who's had to navigate the public approval process a lot when you still do in this role and your previous role at the city. As you know, there's strong opinions from neighbors who can sometimes hold back housing development. Kind of in line with what the congressman said, we want to develop what people want, but sometimes there's diverse opinions about what people want within their communities. Tell us a little bit about your suggestions and how you navigate public engagement to make sure that folks are heard, the government is making the right decisions, but that housing ultimately is built to meet the needs of the community.
Okay, I guess I'd say the way I'd answer that quickly is like a couple of things. So I think one of the things that people don't do, and I had the luxury of, before I did some of these things, being a private vendor who worked for developers to help them permanent projects. I think people don't think about it as much like you're organizing a campaign for your project. You're organizing a campaign that has like a whole series of important milestones that need to be understood and celebrated, and you need to really have control of and understand that permit list and treat each one of those permits like it's a campaign event. I mean, obviously not with confetti and stuff like that, but you need to be, because what you're doing is you're really crystallizing public opinion and a view about what you're doing. And if it was important for your project to happen and make you money and help and contribute to the community, of course you're going to go and have a meeting before the meeting with a citizen who might be able to sway opinion. Of course you're going and find out what they want, what's really important to them. You're going to find out why they're concerned. You're going to engage both the people who are in support and the people who are against, and you're going to treat it just as seriously as it matters. The other thing I'd say, and I remember this about even my sort of public-oriented partners and public-oriented clients as a consultant. I think developers, we can get into sort of, I'll join the group as I criticize them. They'll say, look, I got to get my project to pencil, it's got to work, it's got to make sense. But then when you're the government, you have to remember, at some level, we have the power, right? We have the power to move the administrative pieces forward. And so do I have 5 more minutes to hear from another citizen about what their concerns are? I think I do, right? I think it's my job to have a little bit more time and to sort of remember what the power dynamic is. And then, so when you do take action and you do push for something, it's like, well, we spent time engaging people on all the wide range of opinion, and this is why we're doing this, and to own it. And I think that is something that, developers don't always think about, but it's our job in partnership with them to sort of lift it up. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to a developer and they've said, well, why won't they get excited about this part? And I'm like, well, honestly, did you tell them about that part? I mean, did you tell them about the fact that the project's going to do this? I mean, you're doing a lot of things. They want to hear about it too. And I think some of that comes out with time. And again, nobody wants to hear about time. They want things to happen quickly. But I do think that sometimes they sell themselves short. So Anyway, I think treating the permitting process seriously, developers treat it seriously. It's the most exposed that they get in terms of the money they're putting in a project. So that's why it can be fun to do. But again, working with great people, remembering the public interest, and being able to articulate how the project helps the public interest, all crucial things.
Yeah. On the deals that come through the MSHDA board for approval, so if we're lending on a housing project, it comes to the MSHDA board, and we have a line item in every one of our presentations that talks about what kind of community engagement occurred before the project got to us, because it's very important to us and to our board members that the communities are engaged. And developers, some are really good at it, some need some additional support to understand how to be a little bit better. I do want to say, I see Eric Hanna with Michigan Community Capital, who's one of our great partners in the housing ecosystem across the state. And I was talking to him at a meeting, and one of the things that he said, which I just found so refreshing, was the first thing we do is talk to the neighbors. Before we decide what needs to go where, what the housing looks like, the first thing we do is talk to the community. And I wish every single developer did that. It would make life a lot easier, and in the long run, you get a better project that way. So, Josh, not about talking to the neighbors, but you have partnered with other even statewide organizations across the state to really look at how housing policy can help remove barriers, can engage more housing by right, as Arthur mentioned earlier. Can you talk us a little bit about that policy that's being proposed right now, either in the city or at the state, policy ideas that would help remove barriers to getting housing developed?
Yeah, there's been a bipartisan work group going on for a few months now, and I think there's a lot of optimism that there's going to be a package of bills introduced over the summer that would, some are not a ton of new ideas, but ideas that maybe didn't get all the way through the process or were never put into legislation, that start to look at some of the regulatory obstacles, some of the permitting obstacles and zoning and land use, and trying to figure out where do we start having a constructive conversation around that. Because it is, by right is a big part of how are we going to scale up as a state and build more housing. We got to make it a much higher certainty before folks are willing to navigate that process. And something that we don't always think about that I've seen in Grand Rapids is if you want to, a lot of people say they want to get more people into the development system. They want to get folks that maybe have never thought, oh, I could be a developer, to try it. Well, the harder the regulatory process, the more it's likely that it's just the big, well-established companies that can navigate that. If we really want to see more people throwing in and be able to benefit from this, we got to make it very easy to navigate and very much more certain. But I am excited about the work. Representative Aragona is leading it, who chairs the House Regulatory Reform Committee, and we've been doing a lot of people have their hands in trying to figure out where do we want to start and how can we get this moving. Obviously, when you start talking about zoning and land use, I think there's a reaction in both rural and urban environments that'll be, don't touch these things. But I think all of us kind of hit a little bit. There's got to be some type of forward push towards it. I think that one thing that people, I think, not the stakeholders, but the actual residents that maybe will react to that is there's always this feeling that, okay, let's say we lower, you can't require 2 car or parking spots per unit permitted, right? And folks immediately say, well, there's going to be cars everywhere. Something to think about is the changes that we're making today are still going to take a generation to see the impact. It means that we have to have urgency today, but we also need to recognize that you're not immediately going to see massive, overwhelming impact on a community. And so it's a tough balance, but I've been really encouraged with the work that's being done in the legislature, but also the locals that are driving forward. The state has a program to help support rezoning that Misha's been leading, and that's been great, but we need to continue to drive that conversation faster.
Yeah, I think people worry a little bit about deregulation, but one of the things that always to remember, people aren't going to build things that no one's going to rent or buy, right? So really what the market demands is what people are going to build, right? And so they're going to make sure there's enough parking, or they're not going to be able to rent. Because people will say, well, if I don't have a parking spot, I'm not going to rent that, right? So part of it is how do we make it easier for builders to build what's actually needed, what tenants want or what homeowners want, rather than what the government thought they wanted 40 years ago when the zoning was put into place, right? So yeah, let's keep up the work and see what we get done. The state did have a program called the Housing Readiness grant program that the state government funded through the Michigan State Housing Development Authority, provided $50,000 to local governments to help with any type of land use policy updates that they were trying to engage in. Unfortunately, we're out of that money. But we're in a new budget year. We're planning for the new budget starting October 1, so you never know. But so let's switch to a couple questions. One question I'm gonna take really quickly because it gets asked often is, in Michigan, if our population isn't growing, why do we have such a great need for housing? And that's a great question. And there's lots of responses to that, and I'm gonna go through them pretty quickly. One is we have an aging population. And so a lot of homes that used to house 5 people are now housing a single person. It's sometimes difficult for our aging population to move out of their homes for lots of reasons in which I won't take to go into that, or they choose not to. So our housing size, meaning the number of people in each of our homes, has shrunk. In addition, we have a beautiful state. And so lots of folks, especially during the pandemic, decided to buy a second home here. Whether their primary home was here or their primary home is in another state, they decided to come here and buy a second home. We've seen a big increase in our short-term rentals, again, because people love to visit the state, especially the congressman's district, because it's very beautiful. The state overall had huge demolition programs in a lot of our urban cities funded by the federal government. Thank you for that. It did help us remove a lot of blight, but also at that same time, those were homes that people once lived in. And then, quite honestly, sometimes the homes aren't in the right places with the right amenities that we need them in. So all those things have contributed to our lack of housing. We stopped building in 2008, really at the level we had prior to that, and it's taken us a minute to catch up. But with that, I'm going to go on to another question from the audience. Okay, when it comes to both cost and speed to market, both manufactured and modular housing simply can't be matched. Unfortunately, NIMBYism is alive and well in local government. How can we better push or incentivize local government to look beyond mixed use and traditional single-family homes? And Josh, maybe I'll push that to you first, why others, because you really are working on kind of making zoning more
And I'm a big fan for housing. The
flexible.
answer is yes, and we need it. And I think there's stigmas attached to certain types of housing. It depends on where you're at, too, where it's at. But I think one of the solutions we've found just simply in West Michigan is when you ask people, would you want to live here? Don't just say modular housing or something like that. Show them a picture. Show them what it can be and say, the cost of this is going to be X. Is this the type of a product you want in your community? And it tends to be received a lot better than asking people. If you ask people what they want, they typically say, I want a single family home. But if you show them many options, I think you'll get a better result that's more indicative of where the community is. And like you said, our house, even as population has shrunk in some parts of the state, our number of households have grown, and there's a lot of folks that could make really good use of a starter home that's a modular house or some other alternative, and not wait till they're 38 to buy. That really made me sad today to start out, that 38 is now the average age of that first-time home buyer. And hopefully some of the things that everyone's working on can help bring that back down.
Yeah, I know. As my kids are getting to that age of moving out of my house, I want them to move out of the house. They need to be able to afford to live somewhere.
Locks.
And I want them in our state, right? I think that's right. And I don't know if anyone else has other comments. I know we have.
I would have one very quick one, because I was in Austin, Texas 2 weeks ago on a House Armed Services bipartisan Codel. But one of the companies we visited is doing 3D printed housing, concrete, and we were kind of focused what they could do aboard a military base. Okay, I was blown away by not only the level of technology involved in this, how cool it really looked. Okay, how sustainable it was. It checked for me all the boxes that, as we would look at again, in my role on armed services, to look at how do we create that housing environment aboard a base that the young men and women and their families want to live in while they're serving. And why not try something different? Because I can tell you for a fact, my oldest granddaughter just finished her first year at Baylor. She was born and raised in Chicago, but the point is, she is getting, and I made a mistake when I told somebody she was going to be a decorator, an interior decorator. She says, "Papa, it's architectural design. I'll let somebody else decorate it." But when you look at these youngsters and their view of what they see as their house, affordable, safe, family-oriented, in a community that maybe looks a little different than where their parents or grandparents grew up, but nonetheless, it lights their fire to say, I can achieve that home ownership because it fits everything from my budget to my dream.
And we've seen and we've supported a lot more modular and manufactured projects across the state. And I know there's some work being done in Detroit. I don't know if you want to touch on that or not, Arthur.
No, we're thrilled about having one of our major redevelopments is going to use modular. We got a developer who owns a modular factory. He's using it. Whenever someone talks about modular, I have certain things happen when you're doing this for a long time. 30 years ago, they said, we're going to do a modular project. Everyone knew that's never going to happen, right? And then, 20 years ago, well, we're going to do a mod. Now we're really starting to see it get executed at scale, and you're seeing people, all the things you would hear about if you go, well, you'll save a lot of money on your interest rate by performing more quickly, but I think some of the reasons are the technology's better. I think people are more open to it, and why does it matter that people are more open to it? Is because they'll let their local zoning authorities, they'll let their regulators, they'll let their reviewers, they'll tell them, hey, try to do that. Let's try to get that to happen. And I think actually that's got to be hand in hand with the innovation. It's got to be local willingness to adapt and accept the innovation. We've recently in Detroit had three or four companies put modular and experiment with modular methods. So we're learning about it. Sometimes we're learning stuff about ourselves we don't love, but we're learning a lot by doing it. And I'm excited about the development we're going to have over at Parkside, which is going to use modular construction methods to deliver the phases.
Yeah, I know. I love, the first time I heard about using modular to do a multi-story, multi-family, and they just kind of stack them. It's pretty cool.
It is.
And to your comment, Josh, and yours as well, Congressman, when you get into these innovative housing developments, they're just gorgeous. So you can't tell, right? It doesn't have and should not have the stigma that maybe was put onto manufactured, modular, or even 3D printed homes. We need to be open to look at new ways for production. Sometimes the quality is actually even better because you're in a solid environment when you're building the homes. So yeah, great question. I'm going to say yes to this, but I want to hear your guys' answer. Do we need more tools to support for sale and rental housing for families, even above 120% of AMI? What are we seeing? At MSHDA, we have very little funds for even between 80 to 120%. We're primarily funded by the federal government, and right now the federal government has no housing subsidy for over 80% of AMI. But because we have such a shortage and because our housing is so expensive, folks at 120% of AMI are finding it difficult to be able to find housing they can afford. What are your thoughts on that?
Attainable is a concept. I think that
Yeah.
it's a word. It starts to explain a certain, or put some brackets around a category of work that needs to be done. Obviously, I'm in a different line of work. I'm more focused right now on very low income people, but in other roles I've had, finding the right solutions for attainable housing are crucial because again, when that is a signal matter that you shared about 38-year-old people being first-time home buyers. You would like it to happen sooner.
I think when we looked at the coalition that pushed a lot of these bills with Mishta and others, we saw a gap from 80 to 120, and that was kind of where we settled. And a lot of that is because we need to see those type of products being added. And the higher end of the market was still providing. I think there's again, we always need more stuff, and if someone has a great idea, I'd love to hear it. I'd be interested in seeing, again, what are some of those other decisions we can make that aren't just purely financial that could help remove obstacles in that space, so we can get more built. And again, for those that are focused on more of the lower end of the income spectrum, the benefit of focusing or of having some tools at the higher end is that the dollars go a lot further. And when we don't build from 80 to 120 or above 120, the folks that end up losing the fastest are those with the least income, because everyone else can compete on price and it all rolls downhill. And then those with the least amount of resources are the ones that are finding it very difficult to find a place to live.
Yeah. The housing TIF, goes up to 120% of AMI. A portion of our My Neighborhood funding goes up to 120%. I'd be remiss if I don't say that Mishta has a couple of policy initiatives to take our Housing Community Development Fund and really increase that flexibility so that that $50 million that we get annually could be used up to 120%. And we have a couple of bills introduction. So I'm going to share those bill numbers with you all as you're having your meetings over the next few days with any of our state legislators. You can help advocate for these. So it's House Bill 4539 and 4540, and then Senate Bill 278 really would allow for that Housing Community Development Fund to be much more flexible. That Housing Trust Fund was created about 20 years ago, and it had lots of little parameters about how that money has to be spent, which was probably how it should have been spent 20 years ago. The problem is today's environment's not the same. And guess what? 10 years from now, it's not going to be the same as it is today. And if we want government to be efficient and to be responsive, we need to allow for that flexibility in those funds. So I'm just going to be shamelessly asking for your help in getting those bills across the finish line this year so that we can be better partners with all of you in getting the housing developed that's meeting the needs, the values, and the priorities in each of your communities. A final question for each of you is, what are we missing? What needs to be done in our housing ecosystem, whether it's from the federal level, the state, local? Is it an additional tool? Is it new partners to the table? Is there something that you've seen in another state that we should be doing here? What do you think? I know there's no magic bullet. I've been doing this work long enough that it's all incremental. Every little bit helps. But are there things that need to be done? I'm going to talk a little bit about something we're doing to give you guys some time to think it through, because this was a brand new question. At Mishta right now, one of the new things that we're looking at doing is using our ability to do tax-exempt financing to incentivize the development of mixed-income multifamily housing. So housing that's not 100%, 80% or below, but housing that might be 20% affordable and 80% market rate, right? So that we can have a new tool that might meet the needs in different communities, also will help address that 80 to 120, have some for below. It's something that we haven't done at Mishta before. We're working really hard at that. We're also looking to philanthropy, and I see Kresge and Aaron and his super creative mind, and Neil with the C.S. Mott Foundation. We're going to be looking for philanthropy to help invest in those pools so we can get cheaper money out the doors to incentivize different types of development throughout the state. What do you guys have?
I've got one. Jim Collins, Good to Great, any entity, every year evaluate your situation, what you're doing that's working, keep doing it. what you're not doing that you need to start doing it. But the third one that is the hardest, especially for any governmental entity, is stop doing things that no longer add value to the proposition you're trying to move forward. So I would just say, please honestly say, we're doing this. Why? We don't know. Let's stop it. And that will lead, I think, to more positive input from others to say, wow, government actually stops doing stuff that wastes time and money.
I think I was kind of going down that route, but he said it better than I would. I think having the commitment that we got to keep going, right? We've got some tools, we've got some ideas on the code and regulatory and other factors. When those are done, housing is still going to be a problem. And so whether it's locally, whether it's at the state level, or whether it's federally, next year take an assessment of where we're at and then keep charting a path, because it is going to be a generational need that it's going to take us a long time to dig back out of this hole.
So I guess I've had the luxury of working in a couple of other places in addition to Michigan, and I guess two ideas recently that I'd want to focus on. One is in sort of the public housing space, which has been, when you have well-located public housing developments, densify them, bring back every affordable unit, but then also add other layers, including in some cases, in the Boston example, the sites are big enough where you're bringing back every affordable housing unit in a new way. You're adding mixed income or for sale housing for people of modest means, but then you're also adding market housing. So densifying it in a way that brings a range of different populations together. The only other idea I would share also from another state would be, a housing goal that is connected intimately to other policies. So, a frequent thing, a former and recently passed mentor of mine, Secretary of Housing and Economic Development in Massachusetts, had this approach where he would say, I have to get 10,000 units this year. So if you'd like to see us about other ways we invest in commercial housing, commercial ventures, we need a driveway for your lab space or something. Are you contributing to this production goal? How are you contributing? You're going to be fast-tracked to get resources for the expansion of your industrial park if you were able to contribute housing to this production. And that contribution can be units. It can also be, I've got a lot more zoned land in my community that people can develop as of right into housing. So ways of connecting this growth. I think one thing we forget about is that sometimes, although you haven't, in some of your policies, I haven't forgot about it, it's the intimate connection between our ability to grow economically and our ability to house people. It's people that drive the economy, especially now when we're kind of in a different era. People drive economic opportunity, the talent does. So how do we get the talent here to build? You got to connect the housing to the economic development efforts.
Yeah, and we're doing it in a couple quick ways, I'll say. We certainly in how we allocate our low-income housing tax credits in this new QAP really has points for locating your housing development during or near areas of high job growth. So we're really kind of forcing people to build housing for economic growth. And then, of course, earlier this year, we launched our employer-assisted housing program, which matches employers' investments into housing, whether it's for their own employees or just workforce housing in general, dollar for dollar, right? Whether it's land donation, money for subsidy, down payment assistance, rental assistance, really trying to leverage and make that connection a little bit more clear between economic growth and housing, because it's needed. But I love talking housing, so I want to say thank you guys so much. This has been so fun having you here. I appreciate all that you guys do to support the housing development in our state, and keep up the work. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
From Delta Faucets to Behr Paint, Masco Corporation is proud to deliver products that enhance the way consumers all over the world experience and enjoy their living spaces. Masco, serving Michigan communities since 1929.
The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit PBS. Through our giving, we are committed to meeting the needs of the communities we serve statewide to help ensure a bright and thriving future for all. Learn more at dtefoundation.com.
We help organizations find their voices through what they do and who they impact. We are VVK PR and Creative, a Detroit agency telling the stories of critical issues affecting the big picture and the small moments. Stories at Skyline Heights and on-the-ground influence. We lead with relationships first, solutions always, and with diversity as our compass. VVK PR and Creative.